أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the most merciful. All praise is due to Allah, and may His peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wherever you are, whatever time it may be, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace and the blessings of Allah be upon all of you. Apologies for starting few minutes late. We're just running late because of the timing of the prayers. Prayed Isha and then had to come up with and do this. But as always, thank you for joining us, and I'm really excited for our program today or this evening. My guest is going to be my beloved friend, young brother, I must say, Ammar AlShukry, and we will be discussing this notion of identity of immigrants' children. Usually, what happens is this is a small survey that I did in my youth group a few years back. I had about 25 kids. And I asked all these kids, I knew their parents, and every single one of them was born in the States. And I would ask and I would say, where are you from? And somebody would say, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, Palestine, Egypt, this place and that place. And not a single one said, I'm from LA, I'm from Orange County, or I am from California. And what happens is that we run into this identity. What are you? I know your parents come from this place, but usually for people who live in North America, and generally speaking for people who live in the West, they identify with the place of birth, where they grew up, and how long they have been there, how perfect their language is, and so on. Is this confusing? Well, let's see if we can find out. Shaykhna Ammar, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Shaykh Yasir.
It is
Long time.
good to have you.
It's great to be with you, alhamdulillah, and the great community at Memphis Islamic Center and everybody else. Alhamdulillah.
Beautiful.
It's a pleasure.
Beautiful. So, Shaykhna, take us through this. We're talking about this idea of immigrant children. Are they really as confused as we're trying to make them sound to be?
I think I don't think it's them that's confused. I think it's the parents that are confused.
Okay.
And it's a price that is paid. And so this is a conversation that I've had a lot with my own community, the Sudanese community, because of a very particular story that I think is shared amongst a lot of immigrant communities. And that is the idea of people coming to the United States for an opportunity. And many of the immigrants who come over to the United States are not necessarily intending when they arrive that they are actually migrating to the United States. There's a difference. And so even the wording that is used is different. You have what's called اغتراب, which is to be an expatriate in a country, and then you have immigration or hijrah. And so many times people will live in the United States with the idea of actually being an expatriate, even as they're going through all of the motions of someone who has actually immigrated from one land to another. And so this is a separation that doesn't exist in the minds of many immigrants. And it causes for them to live in the United States, even though their hearts and minds the entire time are living in their countries of origin. And they're raising their children for 10 or 15 or 20 or even sometimes 30 years with the idea that they are Bengali or Pakistani or Sudanese or what have you, not realizing that their children the entire time are actually growing up. As you mentioned, this is the place where their memories are. This is the place where their schooling is. This is the place where their friends are. Yeah.
And it's interesting you say that, because as a therapist, a great deal of my time is actually spent, especially when I'm doing family therapy, a great deal of my time is spent being either a translator or an ambassador, trying to link these two roles together. And it's interesting you said that, because many times some of these parents, they immigrate here, and what happens is that they end up residing in the United States, but they are still living somewhere else. And by the way, we're not necessarily holding that against you as an immigrant. You know, people usually born here, speaking English with no accent, their sense of belonging is much stronger than people who were not born here, who were not raised here, who don't speak English as native. So that's not something to be held against the parents. It is just that when it results in the confusion, and then it results in this cultural gap between the parents and the children, that is, I think, when it becomes problematic.
Yes, and specifically, it also becomes problematic when you have communities that are not investing in the local projects and local initiatives, because all of their hopes and dreams and inspirations and wealth is being sent overseas to build, for example, homes that they're actually never going to live in, right? Undertaking major projects just because in their mind this is a metric of success that exists in the minds and hearts of the people who they're actually seeking to impress by living in the United States. And so you can imagine an entire community where the investments and the infrastructure that could have been built in the United States for their children and their great grandchildren and their great great grandchildren is instead squandered because the entire time they're not thinking about, they're not even asking that question, like that they going to reside here for all intents and purposes for the rest of their lives and their children as well.
Interesting. What about so this is on the part of the parents, and you can almost say that, and I understand where they're coming from. And I remember, doing some studies on this notion of identity, and inshallah, let's converse about this for a second here. When people speak of identity, I think the easiest one is the political identity, and that would be like, which passport do you hold? And most people don't really have a problem identifying as, my passport is, I'm an American passport, the most powerful, one of the most powerful passports in the world. So there is this political identity, there is assumed identity, there is accepted identity, and then there is the psychological identity, and that is, how do you identify? And I think sometimes also people are guilted about identifying as Americans psychologically. That is, I'm not sure if you've experienced that before.
I have, because I've lived it, and actually, it was a specialist in public relations and politics, actually, who was able to differentiate for me why, as a young Muslim growing up in the United States, why we had that problem. And so he said, because a lot of practicing Muslims see America as at conflict to some degree, or as an oppressor overseas, or as an
There's a nice
imperial
conversation.
power. What's that?
No,
Hello.
I was just commenting on that. Keep going.
Yeah, so they see it as being an imperial power or what have you, and so they might be conflicted in saying that they are American fully, but at the same time, they would have very little hesitation representing parts of America that they didn't see, like a state, for example. And so Californian Muslims will very much talk bad about New Jersey, and they'll be very proud of California and In and Out and all of those things. And a Muslim from Memphis will be very proud to represent their city as a Memphian and a New Yorker at the same time. You don't find that conflict because they don't see these states or these cities as playing that role.
On a side note, if you're from California, you have the right to badmouth all the other states. I guess that
Oh,
would
yeah, like
that.
this. Hey, all the other places don't have earthquakes, so that's okay. And these Californians are flooding into Texas right now, so there must be something right. Alhamdulillah.
All right, great.
Yeah,
And Sheikh,
but that idea, Sheikh, as far as political identity, is very interesting as well, because I think one of the things is not necessarily the political identity, but the ethnic identity. Um, but even with regards to the political identity, I mean, a lot of our parents came of age when, for example, with regards to Africa, if you're talking about they were born in the 1940s or the 1950s or the 1930s, they saw independence happening throughout the world. And so for them, this is not just, the corrupt Sudan that I saw. This is not just the corrupt, Pakistan that their kids might have seen or what have you. This was the dream. This was the vision. And so their attachment to it is actually might have shaped their entire lives.
Yeah. And just for our viewers, if you've just joined us, my guest this evening is my beloved brother Ammar AlShukry, and we are discussing identity related issues to children of immigrants. And please, if you have a question or comment to either one of us, please feel free to use the chat box on YouTube, and we will be addressing these questions as they come. Sheikhna, what about this idea of sometimes I would want to identify as a local, as a native. Maybe I was born and raised here. And when people see me, they look at my name, they would make a comment and they say, "Oh, wow, you speak very good English. Where are you from?" The same
Yeah.
is not said to somebody, let's say, who is of Greek origin. His or her parents don't necessarily speak English, but yet when they come in as from a European white background, the sense of belonging is almost immediate, and that is not alluded to somebody else who does not necessarily represent, the stereotypical white European.
Yeah, but I think if people are accented, no matter where they're from, people ask them and say, "Where are you from?" So if a person is French and they speak with an accent, they'll still be asked, "Where are you from? Where's that accent from?" If someone speaks with a Spanish accent from Spain, they'll still be asked where you're from. One of the interesting things that I have with regards to an accent is, and you know this better than me, the British accent by many is considered to be attractive. The Italian accent by some is considered to be attractive. The Spanish accent by many is considered to be attractive. I wonder where we lost confidence in this notion of being accented. Like, why is that a problem per se? Why is it a sense of
It is. I'm
of
sorry, Sheikhna. It is not per se a problem. What I was alluding to is people who speak English with no accent. They don't speak
yes,
English with an accent, yet they're being asked, "Where are you
where
from?" Versus
yeah.
people who represent the stereotypical European features. They don't get asked these questions, despite the fact that their parents or they could have been Italian or Greek or whatever, a country that does not necessarily speak English, but they don't get being asked this question. So, and as you know, that in cultures, there are always the owners of the cultures, and then there are the belongers of the cultures. And immigrants are given
That's
the feel that they are a belongers to the cultures, and they're not owners of the culture. So the belongers are always at the mercy of the owners, whether they are accepted in or they're not accepted in.
absolutely, that's 100% true. I mean, when I go to Sudan, I am the privileged in Sudan. When I walk in, I remember very vividly having a conversation with a old man who was sitting outside of his store. He was sitting outside of a waqala, and he was lamenting all of these people who are coming in and ruining the country. And they were people from Western Sudan and Eastern Sudan and all sorts of places, definitely Southern Sudan. And he's looking at me for validation, not realizing that I had probably spent less time in Sudan than any of these individuals. And my entire life, it was just a number of years. And so for him to automatically assume that I am a owner of the culture, um, I thought was very, very telling, right? Because these things play out everywhere on earth.
Interesting. Interesting. So what I hear you say is, just going back to the conversation that you had with the somebody that I don't think you mentioned who it was, but they were trying to help you understand the political identity when not in sync with the psychological identity. The politics and psychology get mixed up in that state, and that is, since people did not like what America does to the rest of the world, or to the, I guess, the foreign policies, people have a hard time identifying as such. Did I get that right?
Yeah, but I'm not even sure that's common now. Like, I think that that was more the generation that grew up in the immediate aftermaths of 9/11, and so part of their identity was formed before 9/11, and part of it continued on after 9/11. With regards to young people now, I think they fully embrace their Americanness as part of a general, the Muslim community's general movement towards complete complete assimilation, or with much more passion and much more care to assimilate than it did um, before
Is
9/11, when it was very
and
much
is
isolated.
that a good thing or a bad thing, or what is your read into that?
So I believe that part of it is good and part of it is bad. I think that we have to be comfortable in our otherness as Muslims. I love the slogan that exists in Austin, Texas, which is "Keep Austin Weird." Portland, Oregon, for those in the West Coast, also, the slogan is "Keep Portland Weird." And so I believe that we have values that we add to American society, and we have things that are absolutely beautiful that we can offer to American society. And so we have to present those and we have to be confident in them, whether it's something that we perform or something that we restrain from performing, and that we have a part of the conversation that we have to present to offer solutions to the things that ail us all as Americans.
And is being other, is that a requirement to make that type of contribution?
No, I don't think it's necessarily a requirement in some places, but in some things it might be a requirement. I think that we have to be comfortable with the idea. We have to be comfortable with the idea, especially when you look at, for example, the prevalence of the direction the country is going in with regards to, for example, sexual relations, and you're the expert, right, on this. So I don't want to give fatwa when Malik is in the city, but the idea is that when the entire culture is moving in a direction, we have to be comfortable as Muslims to say, I'm not going in this direction, and we're not going in this direction. And the fact that we're not doing that is something that we are proud of, and it's beautiful and it's appropriate. And these are the reasons why. And we have to be confident in showcasing this and sharing this with others, whether privately or publicly. And so that's, to me, that's being comfortable in your otherness. That's being comfortable, being strange, being weird, being counterculture.
Nice. And Sheikhna, just not necessarily on that specific topic, but what risks are people taking in their otherness when they do that?
So, what risk? A lot of them are feared. A lot of them are feared. A lot of them are. So, when we move towards assimilation and wanting to kind of be as American as apple pie and Main Street and all of that type of stuff, which could be fine if a person does it on their own terms and doesn't lessen the standards that they have for their religion or for their community or for their own values in doing so. And so if people are accepted, then that's well and good. But if a person is, of course, if a person is going against their own values, if a person is selling themselves short and selling their community short, to because of them being afraid of being looked at as others, incredibly problematic, because your community will see through you, people will see through you, and even um, especially young people who have a lot of courage, they will see through that which is authentic versus that which is complacent.
Nice. And you said that the fear here is what? Rejection. The fear is not acceptance. When
The
people
fear
do
is,
take pride in the otherness.
yeah, the fear is rejection. The fear is lack of acceptance. The fear is lost opportunities. The fear is some sort of progression in the community that people expect. And so, if you look at, for example, if I can give an example, you have someone, if I can mention her name, and that is, the supermodel Halima Aden. She was very much lauded. She was very much celebrated because she was the hijabi who's on the cover of Sports Illustrated swimsuit magazine. She is the IMG model, famous modeling agency that I guess every model would want to be on or something like that. So she's breaking barriers in her hijab. But at what cost is she doing it? At the end of the day, she made a huge ripple effect just a couple months ago, basically coming to terms with her own self and saying that I was doing this thinking that I was being, um, you know, uh, a trailblazer, what have you. But at every turn, I was actually sacrificing my deen, and I was sacrificing, and I was actually, she said that she was betraying the girls that she was trying to represent. And that is an amazing realization on her behalf, incredibly courageous. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless her. But that idea of even asking the question, should a Muslimah who is a hijabi want to be on the cover of Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition in the first place? Right? That's a person simply going in the direction of whatever is mainstream and hopefully trying to put some sort of Islamic veneer there, or trying to make a Muslim somehow represented there. Not every place needs Muslim representation.
And I just love that example. And like you said, we absolutely celebrate our sister, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless her, Ya Rabbal Alameen. And I remember when I read that story, I, what came to mind is what the Prophet, peace be upon him, said: "Man taraka shay'an lillahi awadahu Allahu khayran min." Whosoever leaves or abandons or gives away, gives up something for the sake of Allah, Allah will compensate him with something better than what he has left and what he has, decided to abandon. And sometimes people don't necessarily, appreciate what was at stake for her, at least, financially, and all the glamour and the fame that you spoke about and the popularity. And for people do that, and I think that is part of that. Isn't that also part of being an American? And that is people making these choices. Is that not part of what it means to be in this land of the free?
And that's the really interesting thing about it, Sheikh, is that we have to appreciate that America is warmer and more accepting and more tolerant of differences. Even when we complain about its restrictions and what have you, it's still more tolerant than many, 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 many societies, including Europe. And so I give you an example, and this is the example that I give everybody. When I moved from New York to Houston, and I was struck by Southern hospitality. I don't know, Sheikh, since you moved to Memphis from California, if you've noticed Southern hospitality. Have you?
Beautiful people, beautiful, sweet people, mashallah.
What have you noticed that's different in the way that they interact with you
Oh,
than
they're very
California?
friendly. They are at ease. I noticed also, as far as the as well, nowadays because of social distance, but the social distance was much closer. They were more relaxed. They were more chill, and I absolutely loved it when people would say, when they would wish you to have a blessed day.
Yes,
And coming from California, that's not something that you heard. Or an email would be sent and it would say, have a blessed day. That's like the first thing that caught my attention.
beautiful. So for me, the first thing that caught my attention was how people would say, "How are you?" And they would stop waiting for me to respond. They were waiting for me to respond. In New York, everybody says "How are you" as they're moving by, and that's if they say "How are you." There's no right for you to receive a "How are you" from anybody. That's a complete fadl from them. It's grace from them. But that being said, when I was in Houston, everybody says "Hi, how are you? Good morning," and they're waiting for you to respond. And you're getting called sugar and honey and sweetie and all this type of stuff at the checkout lines and all of this. I was just like, what is going on? Who are these people? And so when I went back to New York for a visit, and I started saying hi, good morning, how are you to people, and they were looking at me like I'm a tourist. Like they were like, what is wrong with this person? And I said to myself, subhanallah, like I need to calm down. I need to stop doing that. But then I thought to myself, listen, is saying good morning, hi, is this from makarim al-akhlaq? Is it good character? Yes, it's good character. And so if it's good character, then as a Muslim, shouldn't I do it? If New Yorkers don't, it's not part of their culture. Am I not allowed to introduce something new? I mean, doesn't culture change? Isn't it fluid? And so who better to introduce something good than Muslims, right? And so that's what I did. I said, you know what? A lot of times people, they don't say good morning, hi, or they don't respond because they're not really sure. You know, a lot of people have Bluetooth headphones on and things like that. When you hear somebody say something and you didn't catch it because they didn't say it clear enough or loud enough in the first place, you would just assume that they're not talking to you. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to look everybody in the eye. I'm going to be very clear. I'm going to be loud enough that they hear for sure. And I'm going to say, hi, good morning. How are you? I'm going to make it so that there's no way for them to misunderstand that I'm talking to them.
Beautiful. And Sheikh, sorry, something that you said earlier in the beginning of this statement, the idea of we don't know how warm, accepting America is. My guess is that, are you saying we immigrants, we Muslims, because like people have been here, living here long enough, and yet there is a possibility that you're suggesting that we don't know this, this aspect of America.
Yeah, I think so. I think sometimes we might know it, or sometimes we don't appreciate it, and sometimes we forget, and we need to remind ourselves of that. So, especially when people have lived overseas, right? And something that I communicate to young people all the time. It's sometimes you have a fantasy of what it's like to live overseas. I remember one time I went to a program, which was a poetry program by some kids who were all ethnically from one particular country. And each one got up and waxed this poetic verse about their homeland. And then the next one got up and waxed all of this poetic verse, beautiful, about the beaches and the sun and the people and all of that type of stuff. And they all did these amazing poems about their homeland. And I'm listening one after the other. And then I came to this realization, and I was like, you know what? These guys all sound like they've never been there. All of them. They sound like they've never been there. And so then I asked them, I said, have any of you been to this place? Have any of you been to this country? And they all said, no, we've never been there. And so they're living in this, in their mind, they've got this utopian place, and they're juxtaposing it against their existence here in the United States. And so the US is becoming the villain, and that place, this fantasy land, because it's not real, it is considered to be the refuge. And I found that to be something that, you know what, it's important that we remind each other that there's a reason why. Sheikh, this is my personality, okay? There are people who move to Houston and they bash Houston all the time, okay? Because they moved to Houston. People might move to Memphis and they'll talk about California. California is better. California is better. California is better. But there's a reason that you're in Memphis, right? There's a reason why I'm in Houston. And the reason why, realistically, for most people, some people might be here without their will or with any place, but the reason is that you're here because this is a better place for you at this point in time in your life. And so I feel like it's a disservice that a person, when they're being hosted by a place, that they are only seeing what's negative. So maybe I'm an optimist, I don't know, but this is the way that I like to look at things. But with regards to this, so I can finish that New York story, Sheikh. So I went to, and I gave salam to everybody. Not salam, but I said good morning to everybody. And these cold New Yorkers, every single one of them responded back to me with, hi, good morning, how are you? Every single one of them, except for one guy in Manhattan, he was a jerk. But everybody else. And so what that showed me is like, no, you can introduce something. You can introduce something of culture that is beautiful. We can add incredible value to culture here in the United States. We just have to be more courageous about it.
Nice. And my guess is that younger people are more courageous than their parents who have migrated here.
Perhaps, I don't know, to be honest, because it's I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, if they're more courageous or not. I think maybe their youth gives them some, it might give them some courage, but at the same time, I don't know if I see too many people who are out in the open, being very, very courageous about Islam. And being very proud of their Islam. And that's incredibly powerful. When I was 15, one of the people who had a big, big influence on me, like life-changing influence on me, was just a 16-year-old African-American brother, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, wherever he is. And he was physically very strong, which made him very attractive, obviously, for all of us, skinny high school kids. And at the same time, he was Islamically very proud. Islamically very proud. And so he was the first person I ever heard say, I am a virgin, alhamdulillah. And he said, and I'm not, and he said it in front of us, like, it's not something shameful. It's not something embarrassing. Even though you understand that it's Islamically, obviously this is what's right. But he just said it with such like matter of factness, like this is the way of a man. And no one could disagree with him being a man. And he said, inshallah, I'm going to get married at 25. And that's because the Prophet ﷺ got married, and whatever he was saying. But it was so, strength. Ya Yahya khudil kitaba biquwwa. Allah says, take the book with strength. And so people are attracted to strength more than they're attracted to weakness. And I think that's a big problem actually that we've done as the Muslim communities, where people will empathize with the victim. They will support the victim, but nobody wants to be the victim. Yes, when you're the victim and you're the one who everybody is attacking and you're the one who's this, people will come and they will support you and they will defend you and they will speak up for you, but no one wants to be you. No one wants to be you. They want to be the strong. Yes.
Nice, nice. Well said, mashallah. And whoever that young brother was, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him wherever he is, ya Rabbil Alameen. And that
Muhyiddin. That's Muhyiddin from Jamaica, Queens. That's my guy, wherever I find him, inshallah.
mashallah, tabarakallah. And I'm absolutely enjoying this conversation and hope that our viewers are also enjoying the conversation. It is taking place with my beloved brother Ammar AlShukry, and we're talking about identity related issues with children of immigrants. And like I said, if you have a question for myself or Ammar, please feel free to use the chat box on YouTube and we will address them, inshallah. You're getting salams there, Ammar, and people are somebody. So appreciate that. The other thing that you also said regarding this issue of, I know that in the study of sociology, studying migration, there is this nostalgia that takes place with immigrants. And basically, immigrants go through 5 different phases. And, the first phase is a lot of excitement. And then the second phase is a lot of, homesickness. They start feeling the cultural shock. And to make up for the cultural shock, what they do is that they create a back home like environment. And that is, the ethnic foods, the restaurants, people moving in the same place. So now you really get this idea of people residing here, but the desire is to continue to live somewhere else. So they do this, create a back home like environment, and the kids are being brought up in this back home environment that they've never visited before. And I remember Dr. Mahad Hathout, may Allah bless his soul, he would, like 20, 25, 30 years ago, he would be lecturing and he would be telling people. And he would say that home is not where your grandparents are buried. Home is where your grandchildren are going to be brought up. And that felt very insulting. It's like, what do you mean? What do you mean that this is home? Home is where my parents and my grandparents are. And to him he said, no, that would consistently keep you to be an outsider. And the minute you do that, you will behave like an outsider, you will talk like an outsider, and nobody relatability becomes an issue at that point. And that is just something, the idea is so foreign to these young people that they really they don't see this attractive. They don't want to be part of this.
Yeah, and a lot of it is unfortunate because it's expectations where it's expectations that can't be fulfilled. And so if you look at a person's identity, it's formulated by a number of things. Of them, a person is your identity.
I'm sorry, Ammar. I think you got muted there.
No, can you hear me? 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2.
I can see your lips moving, but I'm unable to make up what you're saying.
1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2.
Okay.
Oh.
All right.
Testing.
As we are trying to, I guess, reconnect with Ammar, and Ammar every now and then just check in with me to see if we're able to get that or not, to hear you back or not. But as you all know, inshallah, that the month of Ramadan is up very soon. I believe anticipated on the 12th or the 13th of April. And inshallah, part of what we want to do is that we will be talking about getting ready for Ramadan. And I believe we are good to go now, Ammar.
Testing.
Okay, we're good to go. I'm sorry. So
excellent. Okay, alhamdulillah. So I was just saying that it's unfortunate because it's expectations that can't be met. So a person's identity is formed by a number of things, and of them is a person's theology, your worldview. What do you believe? Where do you get your sense of morality from? What's your reference? number two, your language, and number three, your history, or number two, your history, and number three, your language. And so there's a reason why every country, to formulate a shared identity, teaches you American history. And if you're living in Buffalo, New York, you will learn American history. And if you're in Toronto, Canada, right next to each other, you will learn Canadian history. And the Torontonians are closer to America than maybe, or they're closer to New York than people in Seattle, Washington. But people in Seattle, Washington will learn about the Revolutionary War and the things that happened all the way on the East Coast in a way that those who are in Canada won't, simply because it's about sharing identity. And so your history, and that's of course one of the main reasons why when slaves were brought over to the United States, that they were their last names were changed, because history is an important part of your identity. If a person knows that they are the children of scholars and tradesmen and businessmen and merchants and kings, then they're not going to be convinced by any slave master that they should be picking cotton in Georgia or anything like that. And so you have to, history is an important factor, and language is an important factor. And that's why you can connect with a person from Australia easier than you can connect from someone even from Quebec, right here in Canada, because they're French speaking and English is a shared identity. And so when these aspects are all removed from your children, and so they're not speaking Urdu, they're not speaking Arabic, that's not their shared language, they're more fluent and more fluid and more themselves in English. And then there is no shared history. There is no Jamal Abdel Nasser, and there is no, Allama Iqbal, and there's none of that. It's that history, which is such, that culture is so ingrained in, is completely removed from them. How could they possibly be like a person who grew up in those countries where they did learn that history, they did absorb that language, it is part of them? It is an unfair expectation. A lot of parents are competing in their minds with their cousins' children or their sister's children or what have you, who's still growing up back home, quote unquote. Um,
And
but every aspect
okay,
of the
you beautifully stated the conflict and how do you resolve that conflict. So as a parent, I would want my kid to know about my background, where I came from. Not only that, but I somehow want that kid to not just know, I want them to embrace that. I want to make that part of them.
Well, then you have to make incredible sacrifices. You have to make incredible sacrifices in time. You have to tell them that history. I always advise parents, sit down with your children in your living rooms and tell them the stories of your villages and tell them the story of their great grandparents and tell them the story of these things. And don't be so bothered if it seems like it's going in one ear and out the other, because they are eventually absorbing. They might have to hear the story 20 times, but over 15 years they can afford to hear that story 20 times or 30 times or what have you. But they are absorbing, inshallah ta'ala, eventually. You know, one Somali kid, once I saw him, I met him in a conference, and he was 25 years old and he was doing a PhD in African studies. And I asked him why he's doing a PhD in African studies, and he said because when I was in high school around 2012, the Somali pirates thing was all over the news. And one of the kids in my class, he said to me, "What have you Somalis ever contributed to humanity? Yeah, I mean, pirates have been gone for hundreds of years, and you guys are still." It's like, what are you guys doing? What have you guys ever offered to humanity? And he said, what hurt me very much was not the question itself, but that I didn't know the answer to the question, right? And so when you are sharing these things with your children, you are giving them a source of pride. You are giving them a source of dignity. You are giving them a source of identity. And so if that's the case, if you want them to have it, then you're going to have to invest lots and lots of hours of giving it to them. Otherwise, you're going to have to do the tried and true method of sending them over to those places to spend a couple of years and then bringing them back, hopefully a complete package still.
I love the fact that you're not stating this as, you know what, a person is coming to a fork and they have to make a decision whether they are this or they're that. You're saying that you can actually simultaneously be both. You can somebody who is from here, who are also aware of their roots and where they came from, and be able to be part of this and be part of that as well.
I'm interested, Sheikh Yasir, in what your opinion is on this because I'm pretty pessimistic. I feel like every immigrant community is going to be eventually like every other immigrant community that came before us, which is like the Germans, unlike the Polish, unlike the Italians, unlike all of these people, where eventually everybody just kind of mixed together. And our great grandchildren are going to be say things like, you know, my great grandfather is Pakistani and my great grandmother is African American, and I have well, my mom is half Sudanese. Like it's just gonna go like that.
You know, so I started saying the five phases of migration, where I said that the first one is a lot of excitement, and then there is the cultural shock, and then there is the creation. This is what we call the romanticizing the past. So you would hear parents speak to their kids about, you know what, the difficulty they had, they endured to go to school, and how they didn't have electricity or running water. But they speak about it with so much romance, and these things are the very reason why they left, by the way. So that's why we refer to it as people who romanticize the past. What was so
Absolutely.
good? Why didn't you stay there? So then they romanticize the past, and then they try to create this back home like environment. And then interestingly, 5 years later, they go and they visit back home. And now they are experiencing what we call a counter cultural shock. That is, oh my God, this place is so filthy. This place is so unorganized. This place is so this and that. And then they come back here after their visit. And then the last stage is they have to decide where home is. And that is
And,
the
and while
difficult.
they've been going through all of that, their kids have gone through elementary school, middle school, high school, university.
Especially if they come in here with the attitude that I'm here to just get my master's and then I'll go back, and then I'll just get my PhD and go back. I'll just get some experience and go back. I will just make some money and go back. As soon as the kids finish university, we will go back. So there is they really, and what they end up doing is what we call, they end up creating the in between zone, where
Mhm.
they've really neither been here nor did they go there, but they really created this in between zone. And in the midst, they never belonged here, nor did they go back. And like you said, in the meantime, their kids are absolutely here. Appreciate what
And,
you also said.
and you would wish that it's the when you say when the kids graduate university, between kid number one graduating university, you've got your youngest who's still in seventh grade, and you're saying it's haram. I can't do it to both. I can't have them. I can't have this one graduate. So that's like a 10-year gap that you have to fill as well, right? And so and then by then you've become older, and so you need medication, and so you're like, hold on a second, I can't go back home.
And by the way, we don't mean to be laughing at this. Like, these are real stories. I remember when I first migrated here, I would ask people, say, how long have you been here? And they would say, I've been here for 25 years. And I remember I was just like, really, 25 years and you never went back home?
Yeah.
You know, we've been here over 30 years now. And, imagine people just look at us now and they say, 30 years and you never went back home? So this is, these are real stories. But the good thing, I think, is this idea of this is not the end of a fork where you would have to be either or. I think that all can be embraced, and the fact that we live here, the possibility of embracing this is real. It really is doable for those who wish to do that. So you said spend time, and then you also said to tell the stories. Keep going. What else can parents do in
So
order to?
I also think there is a choice that parents need to make, and that is the choice of. I don't think that the argument of our culture is an argument that convinces many children because a lot of parents try to raise their kids saying things like, "We are Pakistani, we don't do things like this. We are Sudanese, we don't do things like this. We are whatever it is that they do." And that's not very convincing to a child because or to a young person, and I've had youth tell me that before. And because again they have been removed from that entire cultural experience. They didn't grow up in those countries, and so for them they're thinking, actually, I'm American. And so I found, and it's not that I found, but it is much more effective in that sense, is to actually speak to them regarding an identity that they can be fully no matter where they are on this earth. And that is Islam. That's the first pillar of identity that I mentioned, your worldview. And we've seen a person who migrated before from a blessed land to a non-Muslim land, and that was Yaqub alayhi salam, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran. And he's from Palestine, and he's the noble, the son of the noble, the son of Al-Karim, and his son is the noble. And so there's nobody with a pure, better lineage than his. If anybody's worried about their family name or them being them having a noble lineage or what have you. And yet, Yaqub alayhi salam, when death approached him, his question for his children was not, are you going to be Palestinian? That wasn't his concern. Many of us literally keep imposing or reminding our children of their ethnic identity, whereas what Yaqub was asking his children was, what is your theological identity going to be? What is your belief going to be? ما تعبدون من بعدي. He says, what are you going to worship after me? قالوا نعبد إلهك وإله آبائك إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق. We're going to worship your Lord and the Lord. I can be a perfect Muslim, as perfect as growing up anywhere else in this world while living in Memphis, Tennessee. And that is something that my grandchildren can be perfectly. That is something that my great-grandchildren can be perfectly. And that is something worth investing in.
I love it. And I remember reading in the books of hadith where they would speak about a scholar, and the scholar would have several descriptions, geographical descriptions. They would say, for example, such and such person, al-Baghdadi, they would say al-Baghdadi, al-Maqrizi, and then they say Tantawi. And the idea to them was, if you stayed in a place for more than 5 years, you've earned your dues in order to have a sense of belonging to that place. So they would literally call him, he was Baghdadi. But then he moved and then he became Basri, or from Basra. And then he moved and became from this place to another. I guess the takeaway message, if I heard you correctly, Sheikhna, is, look, you can be a universal citizen. That means a strong Muslim. Geographically, where you are located is irrelevant. You can be from and within the culture when the aspects of that culture are good, and you choose to abstain and remain at distance when aspects of the culture are not good. And no culture is a perfect culture. However, if we were to follow the teachings of Islam, no matter where we go, be it in Tennessee or be it in anywhere else, you can raise a good Muslim child with good Islamic identity. Final message,
Yes.
Sheikhna, to parents. What would you say?
I love the statement of Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. He says, رَبُّوا أَبْنَاءَكُمْ لِجِيلِهِمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ خُلِقُوا لِجِيلٍ غَيْرَ جِيلِكُمْ. So he says, raise your children for their generation because they've been created to inherit a world other than yours. It's a terrifying statement, but it speaks to the urgency and the greatness of the mission at hand. When you have two people who grew up in the same city, if you have a father and a son who simply went to the same middle school, went to the same high school, went to the same university, 30 years apart from each other, there would still be a lot of difference in their personalities, in their outlook, in their culture. And so what then about a family whose the two generations have grown up half a world away, many languages away, an entire culture separately? And so Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu says, before Ali, how could all of the inputs be different and we expect the output to be the same? And so Ali says, raise your children for their generation, raise them for their challenges, because they were created to inherit a world other than yours. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all tawfiq and protect our children.
Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen. Beautiful. This was a beautiful conversation, Sheikhna, and we have a tradition here in our show. Every time we have a guest that we have enjoyed their company, alhamdulillah, we've enjoyed the company of 4 of our guests, we make them publicly promise that they will come back again.
MashaAllah, tabarakallah. I'll come back on Sudanese Standard Time, inshallah.
Beautiful. Jazakallah khair on, yes, inshallah.
It was a pleasure, Shaykh Yasir. And hopefully I'll be able to get you to publicly state that you'll be coming on my podcast again. You actually you came on my podcast first, so I appreciate you, inshallah.
Beautiful. Jazakallah khairan. We appreciate you back. And on behalf of our viewers here this evening, we say Jazakallah khair. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and bless your family, Ya Rabbil Alameen. And to all of our viewers, this has been a beautiful conversation. Thank you for allowing us to spend this time with you. And inshallah, we will see you same place, same time. No, actually, an earlier time, inshallah, next time. But until then, we say so long and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.